Hi everyone, this is Vivian. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the most important thing in practicing calligraphy. But this is part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, make sure to click on the end screen at the end of the video. As we mentioned in part 1, consistency is the most important thing when it comes to practicing calligraphy. And there are 4 aspects of it: the stroke, the size, the slant, and spacing. So in this video, we're going to talk about the slant and spacing. These 2 are the trickier one. So let's dive in. If you're practicing traditional calligraphy, such as the copperplate style, then you need to do it in 55-degree slant. And if you practice Spencerian style, then you should do it in 52-degree slant. But if you're doing modern calligraphy, there's not really a strict rule. So whatever is comfortable for you, then you should just always practice in that angle or get very consistent in one angle before you switch around. So how you can do this is simply by practicing the basic stroke, the first basic stroke, the downstroke. If you have been practicing the basic stroke, then you know the first one is you practice the downstroke, and we want to not only have a consistent width, but we also want to have a consistent slant. That's why I always use a guide sheet. So I'm more comfortable in writing in 85-degree or 75-degree slant. Here I'm using an 85-degree slant. And what I do is I will practice the short stroke and then practice the long stroke. So you alternate the ascenders and the descenders. Whether you're doing the short, the long, the ascender or descender, you want them all to look parallel. Once you're comfortable with that, then we can pick a letter that has a ascender. So I'm going to demonstrate with the letter D. And let's do a D without the loop first. So we'll just do the oval shape and then a straight stem. So you want to make sure the tangent, or where your oval shape, the angle is the same as the stem. So that's why first we do it without the loop. That will be easier to tell, or easier for you to control the angle of that downstroke. So you can tell on the oval and the downstroke if they are parallel or not. Just you can get a feel of they are being parallel. And then if you don't get that parallelness, then you can just practice several short stroke and long stroke to get your hands and eye to used to that angle. And then the next step will be adding on the loop of that downstroke. So you want to make sure even when you add a loop to that downstroke, you still have that same angle. So the same thing with letters with descenders, such as G. You want to have the oval shape and the downstroke have the same slant. And then once you practice the letters that with ascenders and descender, you can write all the letters with ascender and descender. That way you can really see if they're all consistent in their slant. So the letters are B, D, F, G, H, J, K, L, P, Q. You want to check that they're all parallel to each other, even when some are above the baseline, some are below the baseline. And of course, you can also practice just one letters at a time. So you can just write out a lot of these and see if the same slant, and the L and the P and so on and so forth. And here you can also write out just A, B, C, D, the alphabet in its order to see if even the letters that without ascender or descender still look parallel to the one that has ascender or descender. So you also want to practice the uppercase letters, especially the one that has a very prominent vertical stem, such as B, D, F, H, J, K, R, and also P, which I left out here. So once you do these practice, I'm sure your slant is going to look fabulous. So spacing in calligraphy is quite tricky, I have to be honest. And if you're new to calligraphy, I would say the first thing to do is to space out your letters more. And the reason is when you're using a normal pen, there's not a thick and thin, you're just creating a monoline. But once we start using the brush pen or dip pen, you're trying to create that thick and thin in calligraphy. If you have 2 downstrokes right next to each other, then you need more room in between the letters. So generally, you would just need to space out the letters more than you normally would. So even though I just said that spacing is tricky, I'm going to show you a trick to simplify it a lot. So if we look at the alphabet, all the letters are pretty much a round shape or a straight, a boxy, rectangle shape, or a combination of both. So if we look at A, there's a round left side and then there's a straight right side, and with B it's a straight left side and a round right side, and with C it's round on both sides, and with D it's round on left side and straight on right side, so so on and so forth. And there's a couple tricky ones like the R, S, and V. I want you to put them in the boxy category, like in the straight category. So with spacing, what we want to do is to if you just imagine, I want to pour the equal amount of sand in between letters. Now combining with the shape that I was just talking about, you really just have to deal with 4 possible spacing shape. So there is the rectangle space, and then there is this one side straight, one side curve space, and then there's a one side curve, one side straight shape, and then there's curve on both sides shape. So let's start by working on the first shape. We can write out the word like minimum, which is a word that only has very straight spacing. And this is a good word that will help you to just identify if you can make consistent spacing between these very straight letters. And this is a good way to practice, not only just practice spacing, but then this will get you an idea of how you want your word to space. Because you can have a very loosely spaced word, but you still want them to be consistent in spacing. So I think coloring the letter space kind of just helped me to see if they are really the same, visually the same size. And then you can also practice other letters that has very are straight, such as N and L or MIL, these letters. And the next one will be trying to fit in a word that has a curve in the middle of minimum. So I'm just making up a word here. I'm sticking in a D in between the word minimum. The reason is I want to have still have something to reference to. I want to have a straight space that I can start, and then so when I meet a curved one, I can compare and see if they look similar in their volume. And the third type of space shape is from curve to straight. So I'm putting a B in between the word minimum. So by doing coloring, it helps you to see if all the area that you can color are the same surface area. And then now moving on to the curve to curve. So I have to write two round shape of letters. So I put 2 O in between the word minimum. Again, I'm using a color pencil to help me to see if the spacing looks consistent. And I want to point out these 5 letters, A, C, D, G, Q. These 5 letters, they start from the right hand side, and by that I mean if you draw a property line of this letter, they actually start from the far right end and then going counterclockwise back to the left side. So when we write these letters, we need to make sure that we travel far enough to the right side of the letter and leaving enough space for the rest of the letter. As you can see here, the end of the I going to D is you have to travel far enough to leave room for that oval shape. If all the letters starting from the left side, every time I connect the letters to the next one, I'm just traveling the same distance. But if I'm connecting a letter that start such as D and A, then you have to go too far enough to do that. And then for B and P is kind of the opposite way, because these 2 letters, they finish, the end of the letter is on the left side. So whatever letters follow after these 2 letters, you have to first, travel to the right side of B or P and then make a space and then to the next letter. So let's say if we're writing the word BIN, the B actually, it feels like you're finishing the B once you hit the bottom of that curve, but really you have to go past by the B and then create a letter space and then start writing the I. You have to travel a width of 1 letter and plus the spacing. And if you're writing a word that starts on the right hand side, then such as BA, you not only have to travel from left to right and create a spacing, and you have to go to far right of the next letter to create that A. So it's even further. So oftentimes if we forget to create that extra space, you would just have the next letter, bumping up too close to the previous one. So now let's talk about CERST. I know there is so much to talk about in spacing. So with the letter C, because it has an open counter, we have to be extra careful to really leave enough room between C and whatever the next letter is, especially if you have another word that can be mistaken with like CL. Like if I want to say clear, CLEAR, if I didn't leave enough space, it will look like deer. So am I saying clear or deer? Oh dear. And with E is a similar case because E also has an open space. So you really have to finish writing E and then have a letter space and then start writing the next letter. If you didn't leave enough space, then the two letters will be kind of like overlapping each other, like the ER we have here. And with the letter S, it's a similar case with the B and P, that the ending of the letter feels like it's on the left side, but actually you have to make sure however you write your S, you already leave, outside of the S shape and then create a letter space before you start the next letter. And with T, a lot of time when we write a T, we don't write that bar until we finish writing the word. So we sometimes forget to leave, room for that bar. So when you write T, you have to think that it's not just a single stem. The T needs more room on the left and the right side of the stem. Finally, let's talk about word spacing, which I think is overlooked by a lot of people, but I think it's very important. So one technique you can use is to pick a letter from your writing, use that as a spacer. So if you're writing any words, just imagine you're putting either a letter N or a letter I or a letter O or a letter U in between words. And of course, if you pick a letter like N, it will give you more space. And then if you pick a letter like I, it will give you a smaller space. So you can choose between, how big of a letter you want to use. But obviously, don't use letter like M. That's, that would just be too much space. So either using an N or an I. So that's a good starting point to have a consistent spacing between words. Phew, that was a lot of space talk. Because I'm a very technical person, so this is how I approach spacing, just using geometry and math to figure out how to make things work. But remember, it's really just 4 shapes that whether you're pouring sand or you're pouring waters in between letters, make sure these 4 shapes have the same volume, whether it's in sand or water. So now that I have shown you the 4 aspects of consistency in calligraphy, so I'm curious, which of the 4 aspects is more challenging to you? Let me know in the comment. If you find this video helpful, hit the like button and consider subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time with more tips and tricks on calligraphy and hand lettering. Bye! Don ate your old glasses? Who's Don? Mother of... Who's Dr. Agon? Bon Jail? What? Plump with hair? So, no, I don't want hair on my pizza. Being outside... Why is being outside? You had meat. Yay! Hello? Oh.